Chairman asked why the administration sending TSA personnel to the border. Why they sending TSA personnel to the border? Because there's a crisis. Just a few months ago, they had, in one drug seizure, enough fentanyl to kill 57 million Americans. Last month alone, the month of May, 144,000 apprehensions on the border. And he's asking why we're sending people down. Because it's a crisis. What's the Democrats' response? The Speaker of the House said walls are immoral. Congressman Blumenauer said abolish ICE. And there's been a supplemental waiting for 6 weeks to address the crisis. That's the problem. And he criticized the administration for trying to do anything and everything they can do to deal with this humanitarian crisis on the border. Give me a break. Mr. Chairman, TSA has an important mission to keep Americans safe in airports and in the air. We rely on TSA always to be one step ahead of those who want to do us harm. However, we've learned, as you said earlier in your statement, from GAO and the Inspector General that TSA can improve how it evaluates its own security vulnerabilities. I look forward to hearing from Administrator Pekoski about how TSA can use the work of GAO and the Inspector General to better secure our country. Aviation security is just one part, though, of securing our homeland. Another key part is where I started, border security. I want to extend my appreciation to the men and women of TSA and all the DHS components who have volunteered to go to the border and help address the crisis. There's no other word for it, the crisis. Several weeks ago, Acting Secretary McAleenan testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Think about this. The DHS, he said, quote, identified almost 4,800 migrants this year presenting as family units that were determined to be fraudulent. He testified that they uncovered, when we talk about humanitarian crisis, think about this. They uncovered child recycling rings, innocent children being used multiple times to help different adults gain illegal entry into the country and then be released. He also mentioned an example of Custom and Border Patrol officials speaking to a man who confessed to not being the father of the child he had in his custody. That man told officials he paid the mother of the child $80 to take her child so that he could gain entry, be released into the country, because he knew that under U.S. law he would be released into the interior of the United States in 20 days. But for 6 weeks, there's been a supplemental appropriations bill sitting there that the Democrats won't pass. That child was 6 months old. The acting secretary also said that in the 40 days prior to his testimony, 60,000 children entered DHS custody. And we're going to criticize the administration for trying to get as many people there as we can to help with this crisis. I want to commend my colleagues from Texas, Mr. Cloud and Mr. Roy, for taking a leadership role in highlighting the emergency on our border. We must get this crisis at the border under control. But it seems to me my colleagues in the majority are too preoccupied criticizing the president, criticizing the administration, too preoccupied with trying to decide whether they're going to impeach or not, to actually focus on the problem. Maybe we should just focus on the problem, forget about the personalities, and help these kids, help this situation. I urge my colleagues here today to do whatever we can, stand up for strong border security so that we can bring an end to, as I've said now several times, what everyone in this country understands is a crisis.
Listen, this is an enormous and growing humanitarian crisis at the border. In the last 3 months, we've had in excess of 100,000 migrants come across our border. In April, in March, it was 104,000. In April, 109,000. In May, 144,000. That's a 650% increase over the same month, 2017. We have a capacity in our processing centers, our CPB processing centers, a capacity of 4,000. We now have 20,000 people in those facilities. This has got to be addressed. We have put forth a bill, my bill, it was the President's request, where those departments told us what they needed for humanitarian relief, of $4.5 billion, and it's been rejected. They won't even let us vote on it 17 times. Unfortunately, the bill that the Democrats are now bringing to the floor is full of political poison pills. They don't want this situation solved, apparently.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. I'd like to take a few moments to describe what we're doing on numerous fronts, but we're going to take a major step in our historic regulatory reduction campaign today. we begin a bold new initiative to bring down the cost of housing for American families, so important. In a few moments, I'll sign an executive order launching the White House Council on eliminating regulatory barriers to affordable housing. I'm grateful to be joined by the chair of this new council, Secretary Ben Carson. We're also pleased to have with us Senators Tim Scott and Martha McSally. And here with us are Clyde from Congress, Clyde Holland, Greg Ugalde, Bonnie Roberts-Burke, Pastor Darrell Scott, and you're not a congressman yet, Pastor, but you could be if you wanted to, I can tell you. Would you like to run for Congress? Because you'd win pretty easily.
Government job, I don't know.
But thank you for being here, Pastor. Kareem Lanier, all the people who really care so much about affordable housing, what it means, and how important it is for our country. Overregulation of housing and the housing market is a primary cause of the rising housing costs across our country. Nationwide, it's estimated that the regulations account for more than 25% of the cost of a new home. Think of that. So regulation and unnecessary regulation is 25% the cost of a new home. As a result, the supply of affordable housing cannot keep up with demand today. Over 37 million American households have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So what I'd like to do is ask Ben Carson, who's really devoted a lot of his time and effort to this tremendous overregulation problem. I'd like to have Ben Carson, Secretary, to say a few words. Ben, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for your continued commitment to the people of America. Today, I'm privileged to be here for the creation of the White House Council on eliminating barriers to affordable housing, which I have the great honor to chair. The council, which consists of members across 8 federal agencies, will lead federal efforts to engage with state, local, and tribal leaders across the country to remove the obstacles that impede the production of more affordable homes, namely the enormous price tag of burdensome government regulations. The President has given us a mission to break down barriers and to clear the path for the millions of Americans to pursue their American dream. It's a mission we proudly and enthusiastically accept. As the President just said, more than 25% of the cost of a new home is the direct result of federal, state, and local regulations. And sometimes the price tag is much higher than that. President Trump's decades of experience as a world-renowned builder and developer gives this administration's leadership a unique set of insights when confronting the challenges of developing more housing. Today's announcement recognizes the need for federal policies to serve Americans of all income levels, including working-class Americans like teachers and nurses and auto mechanics, construction workers, policemen, firemen, whose struggles are sometimes forgotten. And I would also like to thank President Trump and the leadership of this administration, many of whom are here today, for once again fulfilling that great promise that the forgotten men and women of America will be forgotten no longer. I look forward to working alongside my fellow council members in the months ahead as we use these efforts to continue to build the pillars of prosperity that support all the men and women of this country in their quest for that portion of the American dream that includes a home. The home is the foundation of the community, which is the foundation of the nation. And we can do this if we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very nice. How about Tim Scott?
Yes, sir.
Tim, you want to say a few words?
Mr. President, thank you for this executive order. There's no doubt that a regulatory reset that is responsible will help more Americans who are creditworthy achieve their goal, their aspiration of having a part, a share in this nation. The American dream so often is seen through the prism of home ownership. This executive order will accelerate the path to responsible home ownership and is proof positive that your conscientious, compassionate, conservative leadership is undeniably focused on the most vulnerable folks of our economic chain.
Did you read that?
No, sir.
Right off the top of his head.
That was very good. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, sir.
Martha?
President Trump, thank you so much for this executive order. In the first 90 days as a senator in Arizona, I visited all 15 counties. We're a very diverse state, and our economy is growing, but a top theme is affordable housing. Yep. And there are many barriers to that, and so this group coming together to cut across those barriers, federal, state, and local, to provide more opportunities at lower cost so everybody can meet their full potential is really important for my constituents, and so I'm grateful for this initiative.
Thank you. Great job. Pastor Scott?
Mr. President, during the 2016 campaign, you stated that you would implement national policy to revitalize the urban communities of this great country, and well, all the communities, urban and rural. And I think this is just a part. This dovetails on the opportunity zones and the things that are being done in those designated areas, and this makes the revitalization process that much more obtainable. So we thank you for it.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing up the word opportunity zones, the words, because Tim Scott had so much to do with that, and it's far beyond our expectation. It's a little different than what we're talking about today, but while you bring up that term, it's a beautiful term, Tim Scott came to see me a little while ago, toward the beginning, but not that long ago.
Yes, sir.
And Tim, I don't mind if you say just a couple of things about what's happened, because the opportunity zones have just taken off in this country.
Yes, sir, Mr. President, because of your leadership, frankly, we have seen incredible growth in the opportunity zones. Here's just a couple of examples. I think it's important for us to remember that in opportunity zones, the average person is living in a place where the poverty rate is at 31%. Nationally, our poverty rate is at 12.5%. Because of your legislation that you signed, sir, we've seen an 8% increase in wages within the zones. We've seen a 20% increase in property values in the zones. That's really important for two reasons. Number one, over 50% of the folks in the zones own their property. So that means that we're seeing net worth increase because of the opportunity zone legislation. So that's really important. Number two, the fact of the matter is when you put more pressure on those zones, you attract more resources in it. Exactly. And from the Treasury's perspective, we could see upwards of more than $50 billion descending upon these zones, creating opportunities in workforce housing that we're talking about today. And that is an important part of the equation. And that is brought to us by your leadership and your willingness to have a conversation about moving people in distressed communities forward. Thank you for saying yes to opportunity zone legislation.
It's been great. It's been great. Would anybody like to say something? And we'll sign up. Anybody? Would you like to say something? Please.
Clyde Holland, with respect to the National Multi-Housing Council and Up for Growth, two areas we've been struggling to produce apartments and the most affordable housing in America. We can't thank you enough, Mr. President,
Thank you.
for this help.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes, please.
Mr. President, thank you for this, and I'd like to thank you as well, Dr. Carson, for your leadership as well. Coming from the inner city, coming from urban America, living within the confines of what it takes on a day-to-day, we don't care about the cost and the we need the housing. And so it's good that we have these barriers removed so that we can actually get access to these things. When you are a kid living in urban America, you don't care who your president is, who your governor is, who your mayor is. You care about the things that are practical to you. And the things that really are practical is where am I going to lay my head at tonight and what am I going to eat when I get there? And these things help more people in urban America get access to housing that is so needed. And so we thank you tremendously.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'd like to say from the National Association of Realtors and as a realtor that I thank you very, very much. The American dream is home ownership. We have the lowest percentage of home ownership that we've had in many, many years, and I think this is going to go a long way to increase that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Greg Ugaldi, on behalf of the home builders, Mr. President, we are strongly behind this effort. The regulatory framework throughout the country needs to be focused on. It'll help us with workforce development as well, and I think that this is tremendous, and we thank you for this.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I just want to add one other
please,
thing.
Matt.
You know, the average net worth of a renter is $5,000. The average net worth of a homeowner is $200,000. That's a 40-fold difference. And we talk so much about the income gap, the wealth gap in this country. A lot of it has to do with home ownership. And that's why this is so important, but it has to be done the right way.
Yeah.
It wasn't done the right way, you know, a decade or more ago, and it led to a crisis. So we have to learn from those situations, do it the right way. And it's really about recognizing that our people are our most important resource.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we need to develop it, and the best place to develop those resources is a solid home environment.
That's great, Ben.
One quick thing, Mr. President, when you combine this with your criminal justice reform efforts, with the lowest unemployment because of your tax cuts and regulatory reform effort, with your fight for school choice so children have a real opportunity for an education, to Ivanka and your workforce, the pledge to the American worker, all of that combined lifts all boats, but it lifts those at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder the most, and that's because of your leadership. So we're just so grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing up criminal justice reform. We got it passed. Nobody else could have gotten it passed. Yeah. And we're very proud of that. A lot of people worked very hard on that, and I see it's a big part of the debates, and now they're all saying it got passed, and it got passed by a Republican named Trump. And the Democrats don't know quite how to handle that one, but we did criminal justice reform, very comprehensive also. Yes. And there are a lot of people, and the incredible thing about it was we had conservatives, very, very conservatives, and we had very, very liberal people supporting it. We had everybody. We had a great bipartisan group. And we had some people opposed to it, too, but we had, for the most part, tremendous support. So thank you very much. Larry Kudlow, do you want to just give a moment about how well our economy is doing? Because it looks like June could be one of the best months in the history of the stock market for June, for that month.
I know, it's most extraordinary, and it's a terrific sign about the future economy, really good sign. We had our correction in the spring, now we've gotten it back, and then some. And numbers coming out, production way up in May, consumer spending, retail sales way up in May. We're going to have a better Q2 than people initially thought. I think we're on track for 3% economic growth or better. And to remind Brookie, low tax rates, deregulation, opening up energy, trade reform, initiatives like this from Secretary Ben and others. This is what it takes. We're opening doors. Every nook and cranny of this economy is coming alive. So if we stay on track with your policies, it's going to be great news for
Number one in the world. If you look at Europe, they're having difficulty. You look at China and various parts of the world, Asia, other places. We're beating everybody, and we're going to keep it that way. So I'm going to sign this, and Ben, congratulations.
Thank you.
You've been working on this for a long time.
Thank you.
I don't like signing one letter at a time. It doesn't look too good, the end result.
Mr. President, are you personally concerned, Mr. President?
Wait till you hear this beauty.
Are you personally concerned about the conditions at these border facilities?
Yes, I am. I'm very concerned. And they're much better than they were under President Obama, by far. And we're trying to get the Democrats to agree to really give us some humanitarian aid, humanitarian money. And that is a very fair question. And I appreciate that question. But I'm very concerned. It's in much better shape than it ever was. A lot of these young children come from places that you don't even want to know about, the way they've lived, the way they've been, the poverty that they grew up in. But with that, if we can get this bill signed, we'll be able to do it. We have, the Democrats don't want to sign anything. And now I think they're going to probably sign this. From what I understand, I call it humanitarian aid. This isn't even about border. At the same time, you see the numbers are way, way down. Mexico has been really helping us a lot. They have very strong immigration laws. They are moving 15,000 people or 16,000 people to our southern border, and they move 16,000 troops to their southern border, which is pretty incredible. And a lot of signs are coming out where the cartels and all of the bad folks, the coyotes as they call them, and all of the bad people that are bringing young children and taking advantage horribly. It's a form of slavery. It's horrible what they're doing to young children. You understand, you've reported on it. A lot of that is stopping now because of what we're doing and because of what's happening on the border. So I just want to thank Mexico. They've really done a great job. We appreciate what they're doing, and hopefully they can keep it up because it's very important. They have Mexico has very, very powerful immigration laws. They can do things. Our laws are so bad. What we would like to do, and I'll do it right now officially, is ask the Democrats to give us help on asylum, help on all of the loopholes, the horrible loopholes that get signed in over a period of years that don't allow us to do what we should be able to do. We need the votes of Democrats. And I think very importantly, you know, because our economy, you heard Larry Kudlow, because our economy is so strong, could be the strongest in the history of our country, people want to flow up to the United States, but you just can't do it that way. You have to do it legally. But you have these massive numbers of people trying to get into the United States because of the economy, because we've done so good. But that's one of the problems with doing well. Everybody wants to come in. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, they didn't want to come in. Today they want to come in. But we can't let that happen. So we're doing very, very firm. And as far as the wall is concerned, the wall is heavily under construction. The Army Corps of Engineers is doing a great job. We're doing a lot of wall right now, and we expect to have 400 miles built by the end of next year. That's a lot, and we're building them in the right places. We're picking areas where we need it the most, and it's having a tremendous effect.
Did you ask your Customs and Border Protection head, John Sanders, to resign? Do you know why he's leaving his post?
No, I know there was going to be a change there. I've made changes, very good changes. We're moving some people around into different locations. The game has changed a lot because of what Mexico is doing. We're able to do things that we wouldn't have been able to do before. The problem with our Border Patrol, who are phenomenal people, but they're not allowed because the laws are so bad with catch and release and all of the different things, including chain migration, the visa lottery. The laws are so bad, and the asylum rules and laws are so bad that our Border Patrol people, who are so incredible, aren't allowed to do their jobs. So because Mexico is now, for the first time in 50 years, helping us, and we really appreciate it, we're able to make certain changes that we wouldn't have been able to make before. Steve, did you have a question?
You had a back and forth with the leader of Iran this morning via tweets. What message did you want to send to him with your tweets?
Well, there is no message. You know, I'll tell you what the message is. When they're ready, they'll have to let us know. When they're ready, they'll let us know. Very simple.
Ready to negotiate, you mean?
Ready to do whatever. Doesn't make any difference. Whatever they want to do, I'm ready. Okay?
So President, on the Middle East, Jared Kushner is in Bahrain right now, releasing this economic component of your Middle East peace plan without the Israelis or Palestinian officials attending. So what's your strategy going forward when there's no buy-in from the
Well, we want to get support, and we have to get economic support because the Palestinians don't have money. And we have to help the Palestinians with some money because they don't have it. And one of the groups that you get are some of those countries in the Middle East that do have money. So they're going to play a role in the peace plan, and we'll see what happens. We had a little bit of a setback when the election in Israel, as you know, is, I guess the result is somewhat mixed because now they're going to do it again. That's another do-over, unfortunately. And but we'll see what happens. I mean, we'll see what happens with that election. But it's an early process, but we expect other people to help out. Because again, there's no money. And some people don't have money, and if they don't have money, it's going to be very hard. We want people to be able to live and live well.
Can we talk to the CBP? So does that mean you did not ask Sanders to resign?
I didn't speak to him. I don't think I've ever spoken to him, actually. No, we have some very good people running it, and you know, I don't know anything about it. I hear he's a very good man. I hear he's a good person. I don't know him. I don't think I ever spoke to him.
Can you tell us about your decision to choose Stephanie Grisham as your new press secretary?
So Stephanie has been with me from the beginning, as most of you know, and then over the last couple of years, she's worked for the First Lady, done a fantastic job. First Lady loves her. I think she's been, you know, just incredible. She's very talented. And I asked so many people, who do you like? A lot of people wanted the job. You know, a lot of people wanted to do it. And I'd ask people, who do you like? And so many people said, Stephanie. And she's here. She knows everybody. She actually gets along with the media very well, as you know. A lot of the folks in the media like her very much, and I think she's going to be fantastic. I think she's going to do a great job. So I offered her the job this morning, and she accepted. And the First Lady's very happy for her. It's a big job. It's a very big job. But we think Stephanie's going to do a fantastic job, and Hogan's going to be with her. Hogan was one of the people that recommended her. Here's Hogan. He recommended her very strongly. I said, Hogan, who do you think? He said Stephanie Grisham. So,
Mr. President,
so we're very
the letter to Chairman Kim.
Exit strategy for Iran if war does break out. How do you have an exit strategy for Iran if war does break out?
You're not going to need an exit strategy. I don't need exit strategies.
Mr. President, can you tell us about your letter to Chairman Kim?
Just a nice letter back and forth. He wrote me a beautiful letter on birthday. It was my birthday, as you know, last week. He wrote me a beautiful letter. I thought it was very nice, and just two friendly letters. We get along very well.
No mention of another meeting?
Maybe there was, but we, at some point we'll do that. Getting along very well. He's not doing nuclear testing. When I took over, as you know, when I became president, they were testing. Previous to that, they were testing so much. They were doing ballistic tests and nuclear tests, and we didn't have our prisoners back. We had a whole lot of things that were going wrong. Now we have our hostages back, or prisoners back. They came back. We've had, as you know, the remains of the heroes, our great heroes from many years ago. That's coming back, and coming back as they find them and as they find the sites and the graves, they're sending them back. The relationship is a far different relationship than it was during the Obama years, where you were going to end up with a war. You're going to end up with a war in North Korea. That I can tell you. I'll tell that to Tim Scott. Maybe you haven't heard that, Tim, but you understand. You were going to end up, I'll tell you what, you're going to end up in a war in North Korea. And if it kept going the way it was going, if you had that group continuing onward. As far as Iran is concerned, the deal was a horrible deal. It was no good. It was no good. It ended in a very short period of time. We're dealing about countries. It ended in a very short period of time. They would have had a clear path to a nuclear weapon. We're not going to allow that to happen. Can't do it. And I'm all for Iran. I have so many people, Iranian friends. I come from New York. I have tremendous numbers of Iranian friends. They're great people. They're from Iran. They're wonderful people. It's too bad this is happening. They're living badly right now. Their country's not doing well economically at all. That can be changed very quickly, very easily. But they have to get rid of the hostility from the leadership. The leadership, I hope they stay. I hope they do a great job. But they should talk to us decently. We're all for them. We want it to be done properly. But the deal that was done by President Obama, $150 billion for nothing. He used the money for terror. They gave the money out to terrorists. If you remember John Kerry, they asked him that question. Do you know the money's going to be used for terror? He said, yes. Essentially, he said at least some of it's going to be used. I mean, he knew about it. He actually said that some of the money may be used for terror. What kind of a deal is that? Then they gave him $1.8 billion in cash. Cash, plane loads of cash. What kind of a deal is that? And the biggest problem is they had bad testing. You weren't able to see many of the sites. You saw that, Tim.
Yes, sir.
You couldn't go into the most important sites to test, to see. They were probably making this stuff for a long time. But with $150 billion going to them, they were doing very well, and $1.8 billion in cash. And you had no real right of testing. You couldn't test properly. And most importantly, the agreement ends in a very short period of time. So they had a path to nuclear weapons. We cannot allow Iran to have a path to nuclear weapons. And by the way, we have tremendous support. And people were very happy with what I did the other day by not doing something, okay? But we had tremendous, and we have tremendous support. Nobody wants to see Iran have nuclear weapons. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Do you think they understood the message you were sending them last week? You decided not to strike.
I hope they understood the message. I decided not to strike. They shot down unmanned, as you know, an unmanned drone.
Do you think they take your threats seriously now, Mr. President?
I think everybody does. I think you do too. Goodbye.
A lot of Americans have concerns that big tech media companies, and Google in particular, are engaged in political censorship and bias. As you know, Google enjoys a special immunity from liability under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. The predicate for that immunity was that Google and other big tech media companies would be neutral public fora. Does Google consider itself a neutral public forum?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, it does.
Okay. Are you familiar with a report that was released yesterday from Veritas that included a whistleblower from within Google, that included videos from a senior executive at Google, and that included documents that are purportedly internal PowerPoint documents from Google?
Yes, I heard about that report in industry news.
Have you seen the report?
No, I have not.
So you didn't review the report to prepare for this hearing?
It's been a busy day, and I have a day job, which is digital well-being at Google. So I'm trying to make sure I keep the trains on the
sorry
tracks.
this hearing is impinging on your day job.
It's a great opportunity. Thank you. I really
Well,
appreciate
one of the
it.
things in that report, and I would recommend people interested in political bias at Google watch the entire report and judge for yourself. There's a video from a woman, Jen Janai. It's a secret video that was recorded. Jen Janai, as I understand it, is the head of, quote, responsible innovation for Google. Are you familiar with Ms. Janai?
I work in user experience, and I believe that AI group is somebody we worked with on the AI principles, but it's a big company, and I don't work directly with Jen.
Do you know her or no?
I do not know Jen.
Okay. As I understand it, she is shown in the video saying, and this is a quote, Elizabeth Warren is saying that we should break up Google. And like, I love her, but she's very misguided. Like, that will not make it better. It will make it worse. Because all these smaller companies who don't have the same resources that we do will be charged with preventing the next Trump situation. It's like a small company cannot do that. Do you think it's Google's job to, quote, prevent the next Trump situation?
Thank you, Senator. I don't agree with that. No, sir.
So a different individual, a whistleblower identified simply as an insider at Google with knowledge of the algorithm, is quoted on the same report as saying, Google, quote, is bent on never letting somebody like Donald Trump come to power again. Do you think it's Google's job to make sure, quote, somebody like Donald Trump never comes to power again?
No, sir, I don't think that is Google's job. And we build for everyone, including every single religious belief, every single demographic, every single region, and certainly every political affiliation.
Well, I have to say that that certainly does not appear to be the case. Of the senior executives at Google, do you know of a single one who voted for Donald Trump?
Thank you, Senator. I'm a user experience director, and I work on Google Digital Wellbeing, and I can tell you we have diverse views,
It's
but
a
I
simple
can't.
question. Do you know of anyone who voted for Trump? Of the
I
senior
definitely
executives,
know of people who voted for Trump.
of the senior executives at Google.
I don't talk politics with my workmate.
Is that a no?
Sorry, is that a no to what?
Do you know of any senior executives, even a single senior executive at the company who voted for Donald Trump?
As the digital well-being expert, I don't think this is in my purview to comment on
So
political
you don't know that.
affiliations.
That's all right. You don't have to know.
I definitely don't know.
I can tell you what the public records show. The public records show that in 2016, Google employees gave to the Hillary Clinton campaign $1.315 million. That's a lot of money. Care to venture how much they gave to the Trump campaign?
I would have no idea, sir.
Well, the nice thing is it's a round number, $0.00. Not a penny, according to the public reports. Let's talk about one of the PowerPoints that was leaked. The Veritas report has Google internally saying, I propose we make machine learning intentionally human-centered and intervene for fairness. Is this document accurate?
Thank you, sir. I don't know about this document, so I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to respond to the committee in writing afterwards as to whether this PowerPoint and the other documents that are included in the Veritas report, whether those documents are accurate. And I recognize that your lawyers may want to write explanation. You're welcome to write all the explanation that you want, but I also want a simple, clear answer. Is this an accurate document that was generated by Google? Do you agree with the sentiment expressed in this document?
No, sir, I do not.
Let me read you another, also in this report. It indicates that Google, according to this whistleblower, deliberately makes recommendations if someone is searching for conservative commentators, deliberately shifts the recommendation, so instead of recommending other conservative commentators, it recommends organizations like CNN or MSNBC or left-leaning political outlets. Is that occurring?
Thank you, sir. I can't comment on search algorithms or recommendations given my purview as the digital well-being lead. I can take that back to my team, though.
So is it part of digital well-being for search recommendations to reflect where the user wants to go rather than deliberately shifting where they want to go?
Thank you, sir. As a user experience professional, we focus on delivering on user goals. So we try to get out of the way and get them on the task at hand.
So a final question. One of these documents that was leaked explains what Google is doing, and it has a series of steps. Training data are collected and classified, algorithms are programmed, media are filtered, ranked, aggregated, and guaranteed, and that ends with people, parentheses, like us, are programmed. Does Google view its job as programming people with search results?
Thank you, Senator. I can't speak for the whole entire company, but I can tell you that we make sure that we put our users first in our design.
Well, I think these questions raise very serious, these documents raise very serious questions about political bias at the company.
Thank you, Senator Cruz.
This man, Eugene Palmer, is the newest addition to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list for allegedly murdering his daughter-in-law. Palmer allegedly hid in the nearby woods and then ambushed Tammy Palmer moments after she walked her 2 children to the school bus stop. Detective Michael Kruger of the Haverstraw Police Department says Palmer allegedly fired 3 shots at Tammy, who tried to escape the flying bullets.
The final shot was point-blank range right in the chest as she was laying on the ground.
A neighbor called 911 when it happened back in 2012 in Stony Point, New York. Listen to an excerpt.
911, where's your emergency? I heard a shot, a lot of screaming, another shot, no more screaming, and another shot.
Palmer's green pickup truck was found the next day hidden in a berm near Harriman State Park. FBI agent Andrew Fisher.
Eugene Palmer is 80 years old at this point, but that doesn't diminish the nature of the crime and how violent it was. And the bottom line is that there are 2 children who no longer have a mother.
Palmer is a hunter, a car enthusiast, and is interested in dirt track racing. He has a deformed thumb. He has ties to upstate New York and Florida. A reward of up to $100,000 is available for information leading directly to Palmer's arrest. If you have any information about this case, dial 1-800-CALL-FBI. With Wanted by the FBI, I'm Molly Halpern of the Bureau.
Thanks, Mike, for your work in identifying this problem. And we've known for months now that there is a serious crisis at our nation's border. This goes beyond border security. Clearly, there are so many things we have to do to get secure the border, to get a secured border. We have to ultimately stop all of these interior loophole laws that are becoming magnets to draw people here illegally. Our asylum laws are so broken that they've literally led to hundreds of thousands of people coming across illegally. I mean, just look at the numbers. Right now, I talked to the Homeland Security Secretary yesterday about this crisis. They're getting over 300 young children every single day, that they have to turn over to Health and Human Services because they have health issues, health needs that need to be met, and they are going to run out of money by next week. This is how serious it is. If Congress doesn't act this week, and by the way, this is no midnight hour crisis. For over a month now, President Trump has been calling on Congress to act and address this crisis. He sent down his supplemental request over a month ago. And yet every single week, I've brought it up to the majority leader, the speaker's been well aware of it, and they've just chose to ignore the crisis. And they've let it come to a head where if we leave this week, July 4th recess, without addressing the crisis, that agency and HHS will go into a government shutdown. Literally will go into a government shutdown. What that means is those HHS employees will be required by law to come to work to take care of those young kids and will not be able to get paid. Steny Hoyer even acknowledged that this is going to be the case next week if they don't take action. Now, why didn't Speaker Pelosi bring this bill up weeks ago? I can't explain why she didn't do that. She has allowed it to come to a head where we're literally at the midnight hour. The agency is literally about to go into a government shutdown, and they won't have the money to take care of these young kids. And again, over 300 young kids a day that are being turned over to HHS with health needs that will not be able to be met if this bill doesn't pass. And so what is Speaker Pelosi's answer? Today, they are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. They still haven't gotten a bill that's ready to be brought to the floor to solve this crisis. And so the latest bill that they've put forward, the president's issued a veto threat on it because it doesn't allow him to solve the problem. It doesn't allow his agencies to take care of those young kids. They actually put restrictions on DHS and HHS, and even our Department of Defense, who are trying to take care of these young kids. And so it's time for Speaker Pelosi to stop playing political games with these young kids that are coming across our border. These agents are federal workers that are trying to take care of them. You've got Border Patrol agents right now that are spending their money out of their own pockets to buy diapers for these young kids because the agency's out of money. And Speaker Pelosi won't bring a bill to the floor to address this crisis. Stop playing games. Stop playing games with the young kids. Sure, you might have disagreements with the president. We're not even talking about the broader issue of solving this problem and ending the magnet that's bringing these kids here illegally. The asylum loopholes that everybody knows are a problem that she won't fix. We're not even talking about that right now. We're talking about the humanitarian crisis, just the basic money to take care of these young kids that are coming over every single day. And the agency will go into shutdown next week if they don't solve the problem now. Not a partisan bill that they know will get vetoed, but look at the Senate. With a 30-1 vote last week, they passed a bill. That's not the ideal bill, but it at least solved the problem right now. It will at least get the crisis resolved right now. That's the approach that Speaker Pelosi ought to be taking. It's the approach that has to be taken if we're going to solve this by the end of this week so the agency doesn't go into shutdown and those young kids will be left in limbo.
Thanks for coming. We are lucky to have with us today our special representative for Venezuela, Elliott Abrams. Mr. Abrams will make some opening remarks and then be happy to take some questions, please.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. A number of comments to make about the situation. First, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, visited Caracas last week. There are over 715 political prisoners and military prisoners being held arbitrarily in Venezuela, and we are hoping that the High Commissioner's representatives, who are currently in Venezuela, who stayed there when she left, will visit the country's most notorious prisons and visit political prisoners. And we hope that her report, which is due out July 5th, will reveal the brutal truths that victims of the regime suffer every day. We hope the report will call, as so many democracies around the world have, for free elections as a central part of the solution to Venezuela's crisis. A word on the humanitarian situation. Instead of caring for or worrying about the millions of poor, sick, or hungry citizens, the Maduro regime is spending millions of dollars on military purchases. We learned recently of a $38 million purchase of military uniforms. In May, Venezuela signed a $209 million air defense contract with Russia to repair an air defense system, to buy 9 Sukhoi fighter jets, and to buy 8 transport helicopters. The regime also continues giving foreign aid to Cuba, providing oil without payment in exchange, unless the payment is the repressive intelligence apparatus manned by about 2,500 Cuban agents that Cuba maintains in Venezuela to help keep the regime in power. Yesterday, a Russian military aircraft arrived in Caracas, which the Russians say was carrying additional technicians to service previously sold arms systems. What we do know for sure is that it carried no humanitarian aid. And right now, the USNS Comfort hospital ship is heading into the Caribbean and South America and will dock at a number of ports to bring medical care to Venezuelan refugees and local residents, while Russia is sending its warship, the Gorshkov, and more military technicians to Venezuela. Inside Venezuela, the Maduro regime continues to undermine democratic institutions, to carry out human rights abuses, and to engage in rampant and extremely widespread corruption. The Maduro regime continues to drive the economy into the ground. Even Russian and Chinese officials have expressed frustration with Maduro's poor decisions. It's very clear that Maduro is not capable of solving Venezuela's many crises. The last remaining democratic institution in Venezuela is the National Assembly, but now 20 National Assembly deputies have been stripped of their immunity. More than a dozen have been forced into exile. 2 have been arbitrarily detained. The regime is methodically working to destroy Venezuela's democratically elected parliament. So we ask the nations of the Lima Group, the International Contact Group, the members of the European Union, and indeed all democracies to stand behind the National Assembly and denounce the regime's systematic persecution. This is one of the reasons why the notion that Maduro might remain president to preside over free elections and a transition to democracy is laughable. These attacks on the only remaining democratic institution in Venezuela are yet another proof that the Maduro regime cannot be trusted to organize free and fair elections. Interim President Juan Guaido continues to travel throughout the country, distributing humanitarian assistance, organizing health clinics, and spreading an important message that he seeks a peaceful democratic transition. Maduro's security forces oppress Venezuelans who demand a better future, and they censor communications involving Guaido, but they've been unable to suppress the rallies when interim President Guaido travels throughout the country. Those rallies have been large and impressive, including very recently, for example, cities like Barinas, Hugo Chavez's birthplace, cities that were once Chavez strongholds. We support interim President Guaido's efforts. The barrier to a peaceful resolution remains Maduro's refusal to step aside. Thank you.
Well, I think that any member who suggested, as she did, that the camps on the U.S. border are concentration camps, deserves that. That's a comment that is clearly ludicrous, clearly something that, she must be responded to. And I think right now we've got work to do. It's important work we need to do. And I think that allegations that somehow the United States is operating in a way that is in any way a parallel to the Holocaust is just completely ludicrous. I think she ought to apologize for it. And I think that we ought to be in a position where, rather than launching attacks like that, which are clearly political on their face, clearly misinformed, we all ought to be working to try to help the crisis at the border, both the security and the humanitarian crisis at the border. And she and all of her colleagues, many of her colleagues, have now prevented us from bringing the bill to the floor that would do that 17 times. So I think it's very important that we focus on the fact that this is real Congress. This isn't model Congress. We have real work to do, and we ought to be getting that work done.
Of course, the NDAA does not exhaust the urgent priorities we should attend to this week, as my Republican colleagues and I have been arguing for 2 months now, 2 months. Congress must address the humanitarian crisis down on the southern border. The situation is well documented. Nobody's in doubt. For months, record numbers of people have arrived at the border, overwhelming, completely overwhelming agencies and facilities. The Department of Homeland Security has had to redirect resources and personnel from other critical missions to assist the Border Patrol. The Secretary of Health and Human Services has said, we're running out of money. To the Secretary of Health and Human Services. We're functionally out of space. So, I was encouraged last week when badly needed emergency funding finally garnered some momentum Under the leadership of Chairman Shelby and Senator Leahy, the Appropriations Committee approved funding 30-1. That's about as close to bipartisan as it could ever get. There's no reason, no excuse why this non-controversial measure should not get a similar overwhelmingly bipartisan vote here on the floor this week. This week, not some other time. Actually, there's no reason it shouldn't happen today. Partisan delays have exacerbated this crisis long enough. It's well past time my Democratic colleagues stop standing in the way and let the Senate get this done.
Thank you. And Mr. Hawkins, I know you're trying to catch a plane. Anything you need to respond to? I had some questions for you, and especially with regard to how Texas using Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. But anything based on what you've heard you want to add before you have to go?
Thank you, Representative. I think it's important to underscore that Texas has a duty under state and federal law to ensure that its voting rolls are accurate, as does every other state. And in fact, Texas has a compelling interest in ensuring that ineligible voters do not vote. Now, why is that so? It's because anytime somebody votes unlawfully, that suppresses the vote of a lawful voter. And that's why we're seeing not just Texas, but many other states, including just this week, California, auditing voter rolls to ensure that only registered voters are, that only eligible voters are registered to vote. That is the purpose of auditing voter rolls, to ensure that the right to vote is protected, because if somebody who is ineligible to vote votes, that suppresses the vote of a lawful citizen.
Appreciate your efforts so much. And I would like to indicate for the record, and I won't have any further questions, Mr. Hawkins. I'm told that you're trying to get away, but with regard to the need for this hearing and all, I think it's important to know the facts on the reauthorization of this. I was fairly new here in Congress, but it seemed very clear to me that since Section 4 had not been changed for about 40 years, it was still penalizing states for sins, wrongs, decades before by fathers and grandfathers, so to speak. And so I know Chairman Sensenbrenner was pushing hard. He didn't want changes. He was not open to my suggestions, but we had looked at a map of areas where there was a very definite problem, a disparity in the numbers based on racial voting, and there were some problems around the country that were not included in the states that had to get Section 5 clearance. And I had an amendment that would require any state that had a significant disparity in racial voting, they had to fall under Section 5. And let's update that, Section 4, let's get a new standard in there. And Chairman Sensenbrenner said, absolutely not, we're not changing it. And as I recall, there was a district in Wisconsin that had a significant disparity problem that might have fallen under Section 5. And Mr. Conyers was much more open to the idea of having an amendment that would require any district, any state in the country with a racial disparity problem would have brought them under Section 5. And I'd said most recently, the second time I talked to him, he was open to it. He said, you know, Louis, I've been talking to some of our experts, and they say, yeah, it's a risk. It might get struck down, but so why don't we just go ahead and wait and see what happens? And I said, I just talked to the previous dean of New York University Law School, and he said he sees a substantial chance that it will be struck down by the Supreme Court when it gets there. But the bill was done. They would not allow my amendment to be passed, and therefore it would continue to punish only those who had engaged in wrongdoing decades before, instead of bringing it current to make district states that were failing to have fairness racially, have to answer under Section 5. And just as I predicted, just as others predicted, it got struck down, and we're still here without a modification that could have been done back in that reauthorization. So anyway, I'm hoping that we will work things out. I'm proud of the way Texas has been using Section 2 litigation to get this straight, or get problems straightened out even without changes to Section 4, and appreciate the chance to air these matters and yield back.